Good day, Deep in Word family. Welcome to day 267 of our Bible study review. Today we're opening up a new book. It's the book of Ezra, and today we're going through the chapters 1 through 4. Now, the book of Ezra is likely written between 460 and 440 BC. And what is the theme of this story? It's of the remnant of Judah returning back to the land of Jerusalem. Now, let's remember, Nebuchadnezzar took the southern region of Judah, which were those from the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Benjamin, and the Levites. He took them to Babylon. Babylon was overthrown by the Persians and the Medes. So chapter 1 opens up with a proclamation from King Cyrus to allow the Judeans to return back to their land. So let's read. Chapter 1, verse 1. Now in the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, that the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, Yahweh stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he issued a proclamation throughout all of his kingdom and also put it in writing, saying, Thus says King Cyrus of Persia, Yahweh, Elohim of heaven, has given me all of the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever there is among you of all of his people, may his Elohim be with him, and may he go to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of Yahweh Elohim of Israel. He is the Elohim who is in Jerusalem. Whoever remains in any place where he sojourns, let the men of his place help him with silver and gold and goods and animals, along with the voluntary gifts for the house of Elohim in Jerusalem. Let's pick up in verse 5. It says, Then the heads of the households of Judah and Benjamin and the Levitical priests, with all those whose spirits Elohim had stirred, rose up to go and build the house of Yahweh in Jerusalem. So everyone all around them strengthened their hands with vessels of silver, golds, goods, animals, and precious things, besides all that was given to them voluntarily. Maybe you can recall this happening to them from the past when the children of Israel were brought out of Egypt. And we know that the Egyptians gave them silver and gold and gave them the fine goat hairs, right? Silk, all kinds of beautiful things. And that was for building up the tabernacle in the wilderness. And we see that the children of Israel, those whose spirits were generous, they gave with a gladness of heart to build the tabernacle. But we also see right now in this story that King Cyrus also puts out this command to go into the place where all of the vessels were brought out of Jerusalem and into the house where Nebuchadnezzar put all of the holy vessels. Now he is calling for those things to be brought out so they can take it back to Jerusalem. It says that King Cyrus did this by the hand of his treasurer, which he gave to the prince of Judah at the time. And so there's a great debate whether this prince of Judah is the same as Zerubbabel. Maybe it's a different name for him, or it's a completely different person altogether. Chapter 2 opens up with a census telling you everyone who was returning back to the land according to the decree that Cyrus put out. We see their full number in verse 64 of chapter 2. It says the whole congregation together was 42,360. Let's close chapter 2 with the reading of verses 68 through 70. It says, As some of the heads of the households came to the house of Yahweh in Jerusalem, they volunteered to erect the foundations for the house of Elohim. They gave after their ability to the treasure of the work 61,000 drachmas of gold, 5,000 pounds of silver, and 100 priestly garments. So the priests and the Levites, along with some of the people, the singers, the porters, and those donated as temple servants, lived in their cities, with the result that all Israel settled in their cities. Now, don't get this confused, because this is the southern kingdom of Judah. All of them are called the sons of Israel, but this is not talking about the 10 northern tribes. They will only be regathered by the hand of the Messiah. This is just the southern kingdom. Chapter 3 opens up and it tells you the time frame in which the Judeans resettled. It says, When the seventh month had come, the children of Israel had resettled in their cities, and the people gathered themselves together as one man to Jerusalem. Now, the seventh month is very prophetic, right? So it points to the future. The seventh month is when all of the last biblical feasts, right? The harvest biblical feasts, or shall I say the fall feasts, take place. So we know it starts off. The kicker is the Feast of Trumpets, then the Day of Atonement, and then the Feast of Tabernacles. But they resettled in the land in the seventh month. And y'all, this will truly happen in real life. Our Messiah, right? And the angel, the trumpet call of Yahweh, that's going to take place literally in the seventh biblical month. Those who are dead in Messiah, they will be called up, and those who are alive will meet them in the air. Our Messiah will then cleanse the land, and then we will come down, and then the millennial reign will start to kick off. Hopefully you see the prophetic messages within these chapters. Now we see two very important characters come into play in the third chapter. We have Zerubbabel, who is the governor, and we have Joshua. Your Bible may say Joshua or Jeshua, but we know that the letter J is not in the Hebrew language. It's really Yeshua or Yeshua. Now, I want you to see how before the children of Israel entered into the promised land the first time, the leader who brought them in, his name was Joshua. And this time we see a priest, and his name is the same, Joshua or Yeshua. It's all a picture of our king and high priest who will do the same. Now it says that the governor and the priest came together and they built the altar of Yahweh so that they can burn sacrifices, and then they kept the Feast of Tabernacles. They returned back to the daily sacrifices, the burnt offerings, and they did this from the first day of the seventh month. After these things took place within the first year, we see that the money was given according to the grant that was given to them by Cyrus to all of the masons, to the carpenters, to all of those, so that they could start to build the foundation of the house of Yahweh, so that they can lay it down first. And so we see that Joshua starts to institute the work of the Levitical priesthood, and we see that the foundation of the house is finally laid. This happens within the second month of the second year that they're back in the land. What's so prophetic about the second month? Well, King Solomon also started to build the foundation of the house before it was torn down by the Babylonians. He started to build the foundation of the first temple during the second month as well. You can go back and review this in 1 Kings chapter 6. Let's pick up in verse 10. It says, when the builders laid the foundation of the temple of Yahweh, the priests and their apparel stood with trumpets, and from the Levites the sons of Asaph stood with cymbals to praise Yahweh, following the example of King David of Israel. They sang responsively, praising and giving thanks to Yahweh, singing, for he is good, for his mercies endure forever towards Israel. The last part of the chapter records that there's this great loud noise, but it's a mixture. Some of it is weeping and some of it is crying out for joy. Now, those who survived and those who actually lived during the days of the first temple period before they went into the Babylonian exile, they remember the glory of the first temple. And so they're seeing that this foundation for the second temple is nowhere near as glorious as the first. So some of them are weeping. But for the newbies who have never seen the first temple before, they are jumping for joy because their hope is being restored before them. Now let's walk into chapter 4 and start reading from verse 1. It says, now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the descendants of the captivity built the temple unto Yahuwah Elohim of Israel, they came to Zerubbabel and to the chiefs of the fathers' households, and they said to them, let us build with you, for like you, we seek your Elohim and have been sacrificing to him since the days of Asur-Hador, the king of Assyria, who has brought us here. Now let's stop and pause and remember what has happened in the past. And so these are called the adversaries of those who have come back to build the house of Yahweh. So this may very well be some of the inhabitants of the poor of Judah who were left over in the land. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar was not concerned with the uneducated and the poor farmers. He wanted to take the good-looking, the noblemen, the well-educated, and he wanted to brainwash them into the ways of Babylon. And he wanted them to be the puppets so that they would go back and they would bring Babylon back to Jerusalem. That was Nebuchadnezzar's plan. Now, that was the plan with the southern region. But if you go back to 2 Kings chapter 17, you'll remember something. 2 Kings chapter 17 talks about the scattering of Israel, the 10 northern tribes. The capital of their region was Samaria. Remember, Israel was taken out, and the Assyrian king at that time took other peoples and brought them in. Now, lions and everything were destroying them, ripping them to pieces, and they realized that they needed to respect the laws of the God of that land. And so they did their best to so-called adhere to the laws of Yahweh, but they weren't true converts, nor were they true remnant of Israel. They were a foreign people. So they so-called worshiped Yahweh while still worshiping their own gods. And so when they say, we have worshiped your Elohim the same as you, that is incorrect, because you cannot worship him on foreign altars, and you cannot worship him properly without the Levitical priesthood and without the temple. Remember, that was the sin of the northern kingdom of Israel, as they built their own altars and they created their own priesthood, which was not from the Levitical line. They fell to idolatry. They fell completely apostate. And so these people are claiming, look, we serve your Elohim the same as you. But some of these who were foreign peoples, they trickled down and they mingled with the seed of Judah, the farmers, the poor people who were still left in the land. But the ones who came back, they were like, you've been compromised. Whether you still have, a little bit of Judah running through your veins, we remember why we were exiled in the first place. So we don't want you to be a part of this because we're not going to go through this again. Just backtracking and brushing up on the history in case you forgot, because they haven't forgotten why they were exiled. And they're like, we're not going to do this again. And so let's pick up in verse 3. It says, but Zerubbabel and Joshua and the rest of the chiefs of the fathers' households of Israel said to them, this is not for you. It is for us to build the temple of our Elohim. So we ourselves together will build unto Yahweh Elohim of Israel, as Cyrus the king of Persia has commanded us. And now we're going to see that there's some backlashing for not allowing them to be included in the rebuilding of the second temple. Let's pick up in verse 4. It says, then the people of the land demoralized the people of Judah and terrified them while building, and hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Verse 6, now we see in the reign of Ahasuerus, which we just read about in the book of Esther, it says, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah in Jerusalem, but honestly, to no avail during that time. But now as we walk into verse 7, we see in the days of King Artaxerxes that there's 3 haters, and they step up to write a letter, and they have a scribe writing it in a language that the king of Persia could understand at the time, and they write false accusations. And so their letter reads as such: to Artaxerxes the king, your servants, the men of the province beyond the river, and so forth. May it be known to the king that the Jews who came from you have come near to us at Jerusalem, and that they are building the rebellious and evil city, restoring its walls and repairing the foundations. Be it known now to the king that if this city is rebuilt and the walls are set up again, then they will not pay toll, tribute, and custom, and the revenue of the kings will be impacted. So they have fabricated a lie that the exiles, they're coming back and they're planning to rebuild the city and restore the walls so that they would no longer pay tribute. Now, this is not the case with the exiles who are returning. But certainly, ancient Israel, Judah, and the northern kingdom, they both have a history of not paying tributes to the kings that would overtake that land. And the fear is if they build up their walls and if they set a king upon the throne again, that they would return back to the power like King Solomon. King Solomon had power beyond Jerusalem. He had much territory, many provinces that he ruled over. And so they wanted to instill this fear inside of King Artaxerxes because they would not be included in the building of the temple. And so Artaxerxes writes this. He says, "Command these men to cease now, so that the city is not built unless I give the command. Take heed now that you do not fail to do this. Why should damage increase to hurt of the king?" And so now we see in verse 23, "Now when the copy of the letter by King Artaxerxes was read before Rehum and the scribe, it says, their companions, they all went up to make haste to Jerusalem, to the Jews, and made them stop building." Verse 24, "Then the work of the house of Elohim in Jerusalem ceased. So it ceased until the second year of the reign of Darius, or some say Darius, king of Persia." And so many have calculated that this was about 15 years. Can you imagine? You're in exile, you come back, you start building the house of Yahweh, you laid the foundation, and you're really excited about, the wheel moving forward. And then all of a sudden, the work stops for 15 years. Can you imagine waiting for 15 years? The adversaries are definitely puppets of Satan, but nothing can stop the second temple from being built because everything still ran exactly on time for the Messiah to come during the second temple period. This did not slow down the plans of Yahuwah. You could never, ever beat the one who plays chess versus checkers. Our Heavenly Father always has checkmate. Deep in Word family, that's all that I have for you today. Until tomorrow, Yah bless.